Hey, 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 to you. Goodness. I always say goodness because I don't know whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening that you're watching. But it's always great to have good in front of something that you do or something that you say. Let's think about that. I'm Sporty King and welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Glue Wednesday. Glue Wednesday. I always come on a little early on Wednesdays because this is my interactive day where I get to talk and do my shout outs and click on people as they come in and say hello. But Glue Wednesday was actually born in 2017. In 2017, because so often people say that Wednesday was hump day. That's it, the old school. We did, we just say, hey, you either work Monday to Friday, and then there was the weekends, the old school rule, right? But there's always been flex time. So we just said glue. We just said that you either had the weekend or the weekday, and therefore Wednesday was the hump day. Well, with me having my word sensitivity and trying to keep everything positive and fun, I decided that we don't need to hump on Wednesday. What we need to do is keep it together because Wednesday is actually the middle of a traditional 7-day week, which everybody celebrates. And that so it keeps the beginning and the end together. And that's the glue. You see how it puts me right into that prayerful mode, which is one of my favorites. And that's why glue is GLUE. God's love undoes everything. So if this is your first time on the broadcast, now you know why it stands for that. If it's your next time, now you've just been refreshed, which is what God does anyway. So like I said, I'll do my shout outs as we come in. The message is going to start, at 1:00. So we got less than 4 minutes for today's message. But that's just to give you that education on what the glue is all about. What is God doing in your life that you can recognize? See, because the thing is that it's not that God's love undoes everything, that it tears it apart, but whatever is torn apart, his love will glue it back together. Everything, not several things, everything. It's just like how sometimes we say, oh, God is good. But nobody says God is good. And then you don't hear people repeat some of the time. No, it's God is good. And then someone says all the time. And all the time, God is good. So we've got less than 3 minutes for today's message. And I just got to double check and see if there's something. Okay, cool. We're good. All right. We got less than 3 minutes for today's message. But how's your week going? How's your month going? These are the different things that we can put in the chat as we in the thread. See, we've got a whole new vocabulary based on this pandemic because we're so used to saying in the chat, but there's also in the thread. And what's the difference? I think that the difference is that a chat will go away once you close the broadcast. The thread will stay. So that, if there's someone a little bit more technologically more of a technological wizard than I, because I always say I'm tech functional, not literate. So if that's the actual reason, but that's what I can see in terms of how I'm looking at things. So yeah, I think that that's the difference is that when with a chat, because I know when we think about Zoom, when the Zoom meeting is over, you have the option to save the chat. Those were the little side comments people were making. And that gives me another look at the thread. The thread is a conversation going on between us, whereas the chat is going on between participants and occasionally the speaker. So, but that's why as a speaker, if you're on a Zoom meeting, don't forget, look in the chat. Because a lot of times, what people have to realize, you have two options on Zoom meetings, depending on how you set it up. You've got the chat and then you got the Q&A. And sometimes it's, when you put it in the chat, the next time somebody puts a comment in the chat, they all go up. And so your question may continue to go up. If you put it in the Q&A, then your question, it stays there and they stay sequential. So if you have that option and you have a question, make sure you put it in the Q&A. And then, of course, if you're presenting, make sure that you're not so busy paying attention to the chat that you don't look in the Q&A, because what that will do is train your audience to strictly put stuff in the chat, because they say, well, I'm getting ignored in the Q&A, and so they'll put it in the chat. And that becomes that, there's a whole new way of learning how to present as we go forward. And so let's go forward because it is 1 o'clock. And so my message today is I want to talk about what I call the Siamese twins, hate and love. And how new is hatred? See, not everybody's talking about the new normal, but how new is hatred? I think we're going to find out that it's not that new. But I also I like to explain some of the things I do because again, I like to give tips regarding presenting. You know how people say let's look at the pros and the cons. I say, let's look at the cons and the pros because I always want to end on something positive. So that's why I call it looking at the cons and the pros. So that's why I put hate and love. But let's talk about how new is it. And first, let's talk about hate. Okay, let's talk about hate because we see or hear it. Okay, hold on. I'm going to say hello to my boy, Vic. Vic, first one on here in the live screen. Got you on there, Vic. Oop, did that come out? There we go. Oh, for some reason, I'm not seeing it. Okay. All right. Vic, do you see your name? Wait, maybe I got this screen too minimized that I don't see it. Aha! That's what was going on, Vic. My screen was so minimized that I wasn't seeing it. Good. So I know it got your, good morning to you. Thank you, Vic. And again, I remind you, Vic, that the Giants have the best record in all of baseball. Catch up, my brother. All right. But anyway, hate. We often see and hear it in regard to relationships all the time. We hate someone for breaking our hearts. We hate someone. Thank you for confirming that, Vic. We hate someone for what they did to us. So we see hate a lot. Yet, if and when we take responsibility for the joy that comes into our lives, we can see that actually what happened was we sought to make that person fit and boost or cement or complete our joy. So what we are saying that they broke our hearts, we hate them for breaking our hearts and for what they did. What we have to look at is that we sought to make that person fit. Maybe they weren't the right fit for who we needed in our relationship, personal or business. And we wanted to boost or cement or complete our joy. You know that saying where you complete me, but the truth is only you can complete yourself. So in other words, hate is H-E-A-T-E, hurt attached to expectations. We had an expectation of who that person was and what they should do in our lives. So we decided that we expected them to fit. We expected them to boost what was going on in our lives. We expected them to cement and help us keep it together. And we expected them to complete our joy. So hate is just hurt attached to expectations. So what happened is we nurtured false expectations of who someone was. They showed us who they were, and then we ignored it. Then it slapped us, and now it's their fault. So think about it. The pain is really from the time that you kept them on board. And many of my friends know that I tend to call it keeping them on the menu. So the pain is really from the time you kept them on the menu. During their time on the menu, we learned a lot of lessons, both bad and good. There goes my cons and pros. But which ones did you keep? Because you learned some lessons. Which ones did you keep? You see, what makes hate and love Siamese twins is that the only thing they have in common is the letter E. So let's look at love. L-O-V-E. Let ourselves value everyone. Yet, the only thing they have in common is that letter E, but we learn more from a negative role model sometimes because we focus on not replicating their spirit. It's a conscious choice, and it should therefore serve notice to us that we can make the decision to let people into our lives as well as control what they bring, especially how long we let them settle. And then let's look at the word settle. It has a definition of balancing the calm. When you settle something, you're balancing the calm. But there's also a definition that settle means it's a disposition of personal acceptance. You settle for something. And so you see, we sometimes enable others and surrender who we are or what we believe to keep the ones we want in our lives. So we settle for what someone has brought into our lives based by erasing a little bit of who we are because we want to keep them. So you got to be careful. That's why I always say it's important to control your vocabulary rather than allowing your vocabulary to control you, because words and sometimes sentences don't necessarily have one meaning. The key with the sentence is that you got to use the whole sentence and then the paragraph because you need the context. So settling can mean to get things together, but it can also mean giving up. And we give control of our lives to someone else. So let's take another look at hate. And let's apply it to some of the political unrest, injustice, and separation that we're experiencing in our country and our world today. You see, hate is not new. It's the news. Older people like to champion the fact, hey, well, things were not this way back in the day. I say to you, they've always been this way. We didn't have access to the fire because we were only dealing with our local fires. You see, in New York, I didn't need to know what was going on in Chicago, Los Angeles, Texas. And so all of my fires were local. See, so we didn't have access to the fire because we were only dealing with our local fires. In fact, I remember in 1974, I heard Stevie Wonder sing, "Don't You Worry About a Thing." And he opens the song speaking Spanish. Todo está bien chévere, chévere, which is everything's really great or everything is cool. And then he starts talking to a woman and he asks her if she understands. Then he goes on to say, now she says she doesn't understand, but he goes on to say that he speaks fluent Spanish and has traveled to Paris, Beirut, Iraq, Iran, Asia. And like the woman, I didn't understand what he was saying in Spanish, but I also thought that he was saying how busy he was. I thought he was saying Paris, Beirut, Iraq, Iran. That's what I thought. That was back in 1974. In 1974, I didn't need to know where Iraq and Iran were. At least I didn't think that I did. As much as I may speak about the fact that good news doesn't sell or get ratings, because the bad news is what gets the ratings. That's why I always say, don't let news be the last thing you watch before you go to bed, because as you sleep, you're in a meditative state. And the last thing that went in is what ruminates overnight. So if you're going to watch the news, then watch some comedy or a show that you particularly like before you go to bed, because that's what's going to happen. So that's why I say good news doesn't necessarily sell, but I do recognize and appreciate that awareness gives us choices. Awareness gives us choices. You see, sometimes the hate is the expectation seeking a confirmation of how or why we hurt. I don't want to make, we say, I don't want to make certain people or situations. I don't want to like certain people or situations. So I gather as much ammunition as possible to drown out any possibility that they have the right to disagree with me. And as long as they're meeting my expectations, I'll continue to meet theirs. And let me put that up there with Vic just said. 5 minutes a day for the news. Yeah, have your own formula. Somebody say, oh, enough. The funny thing is, if you think about it, there's not a whole, your 5 can be a combination of different stations because they all have the same news. So you're not going to really miss anything. So think about how much time you want to give the news to spend in your day. Thanks, Vic. That's a good formula. 5. Yeah, high 5. But here's, again, like I say, since we don't like someone, we find ammunition and reasons to drown out anything that they say And so that we think that would make sense. Because we have the right to disagree because we don't really want to hear it. But don't you realize that they're doing the same thing to you? So therefore, nobody's really listening to it. And so they're meeting my expectation of me hating them because I don't want to hear what they have to say. And I'm meeting theirs because they're hating me and they don't want to hear what I have to say. Now, I still want you to take a stand for what you believe, because like I said, I don't want you to settle and give up who you are. I want you to take a stand for what you believe and who you believe in. But my request to you is that you take the venom out of your disagreement. Take the venom out of you don't have to be nasty about disagreeing with someone. You just have to be conscious of it and resolute. Well, no, I disagree. Vic, you said 5 minutes for news. I think it should be 10. I don't have to be mad at you for saying 5. I don't have to have that anger. So there's where the hatred is coming in. And so it's really important. Take the venom out so that you can have a discussion. Because see, you can't win a war. You can't win a long battle when you're hurt. So if you're angry at somebody, you can't win because you're so busy focusing on the hurt and the pain that you can't hear them and you can't win. And so that's why I say you can't win a long battle when you're hurt. And we're in a long battle, which will only be won by calmer heads prevailing, which is actually what all of us want. Yes, all of us want our way. All of us have to recognize that our way is going to have to be some sort of a compromise, but that's going to require calmer heads to prevail. So make sure that you are one of the calmer heads. You see, you have to see your value on the link of that chain of calm. I'm a link on the chain of being calm. And that's what you have to see. As you meet people with opposing views, know that you cannot win them over by proving to them that they're wrong. You can't win them over by proving that they're wrong. So I want to bring the worst out of me, which I am trying my best. And yeah, let me stop there because I know I'm going fast. I have to remember there's a time delay in the broadcast, what I'm saying and what shows up on Facebook. But when someone puts a good comment up there, I like to point out, Vic, you're so right. I allowed one person to bring the worst out of me, which I am trying my best to stop. And that becomes an affirmation. So that's acknowledged. Oh man, like I said, you can't make this stuff up because one of my wrap it up points is to say that there's certain things that we can't control, and you can't stop that person bringing out the worst in you, but you can control how you're going to stop that. It's already there, but you have to now work on not letting that stay. It's that old saying, people come in our lives for a reason, season, or a lifetime. The reason and the lifetime stay with you because whatever reason God put that person in your life, whatever lesson, didn't I just say earlier, we learn sometime from a negative role model, whatever lesson we get from that person that we hate, or so the person that we're angry with, that ends up being with us for a lifetime because we'll accredit the lesson we learned to that person. What we control is the season. How long do we allow that person to stay in our lives so that we can learn the lesson? So yeah, Vic, and I think that this is a great statement, and I'm glad that I'm leaving it up there for a while because you know what, Vic, this is a statement I don't think we grow out of. Once you get past, stop this person from doing that, there's going to be another one. Because emotions, the thing about emotions, and again, this is something that's coming up in our notes, is that you can't control them coming up. You have to control how you're going to let them out and then what you're going to do with them. See, there are no bad emotions are not wrong. They happen. So that hatred, that anger, that worst that the person is bringing out of you, it's an emotional reaction. And you should not blame yourself for feeling that way. You should recognize, man, they just threw me off my square. I have to stop that. I have to not let that person push my buttons that way. So thank you, Vic. Thank you for throwing that in there. And I'm going to leave that up there until the next point come up. And I'm going to keep on moving with my notes. All right. But you cannot win them over. And so think about that person who brought out the worst in you. Can you stop it by saying, look, you messed up and you have to do this? No, they are who they are. So you can't win them over by proving to them that they're wrong, because they will have the same veil and wall up. See, the same way that you say they're wrong, they are saying that you're wrong. So they're not listening to you. They got a veil, they got a wall up against you to ignore any sense that you're making to say that they're wrong. So what we have to do, I believe, is that we have to listen for where you feel they veered off the path of your righteousness. See, why do you think you're right? And that's the path that they veered off of. So you've got to listen for that, because that's really where the discussion has to come in. It's what they've made you feel that's what you have to talk about. Not that they're wrong, but how they've made you feel. And so that's what you're listening for. There's a communication structure that when someone hurts you or upsets you, you say, when you did this, it made me feel like that. See, that doesn't say you are wrong or I am wrong. It's saying, Vic, one person brought the worst out of me. So what did they do? Okay, to bring out the worst in you, Vic. Okay, and I'm not asking you to throw it out there, but I'm saying whatever they did, when that person slapped you upside your head, all right, in front of people, or cursed you out, disrespected you in front of your friends, your family and friends, that made you feel little. And so instead of just throwing back at them, say, look, when you get them he said, for me to stop this anger, you know what, when you, disrespected me in front of my friends and family, it made me feel pretty bad. Now, this is, by the way, this is also especially important. There's two types of importance. This one is important, especially important if it's a relationship that you are trying to keep, and you're trying to keep the peace. And then it's also important in a business relationship, even if it's just congenial. Okay, because we don't have to have haters. We don't have to have, we've got difference of opinion. So, it's that agree to disagree thing. But it's important to say, look, when you did this, when you disrespected me, it made me feel. I'm sorry, not when you disrespected me. Oops, because see, that's already telling them that they were wrong. When you when you said this about me in front of those people, it made me feel disrespected. And so I'd like to ask you to not talk to me that way in front of people. That's the textbook way of doing it. It's the calm that I talked about earlier, and it's a model for communication. So that's why we have to listen for where we feel that they veered off the path of our righteousness. Because we're still righteous. Yeah, no, that didn't work for me. In a way, that's you being righteous. Yeah, because maybe it worked for them, but it didn't work for us. Man, it's hard, looking at things from both sides, but it's one of the things that we have to do. See, don't you remember seeing why the actors on the screen or in a play didn't know how much they had in common, because they were too busy letting other people poison their communication intake by telling them how separate they were. So that's why I'm saying they won't listen to you the same way you won't listen to them. And you're watching the show on the movie, and you're like, no, y'all are actually cool. Don't listen to that. And you talk to the screen, okay? But and you sit there and you say that, and you know what? That same thing is going on in our lives. And I always say, choose your messengers carefully, and know that you're carefully being chosen as a messenger. So who's giving you information about the other person that's separating you, when in fact they should be giving you information that could be pulling y'all together? Now, my mind, as I looked at this topic, my mind wandered to the poem, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. In 1989, that was the title of Maya Angelou's first book, I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings. But did you realize that the words were actually first written in 1899 by one of the first nationally acclaimed African-American poets, Paul Laurence Dunbar, in his poem, sympathy. That the words were first used there. And the poem speaks about brutal slavery, racial segregation, and social discrimination. 1899, Paul Laurence Dunbar, sympathy. And he has in there talking about the caged bird singing. It was talking about brutal slavery, racial segregation, social discrimination. Those were going on back then. You see, those things were practiced in American society against the African American community. And using the metaphor of a bird, Dunbar highlights the importance of freedom. He also describes captivity through the plea and struggle of a caged bird. Here's a stanza. I know why the caged bird sings, ah, me. When his wing is bruised and his bosom sore, when he beats his bars and he could be free. It is not a carol of joy or glee, but a prayer that he sends from his heart's deep core, but a plea that upward to heaven he flings. I know why the caged bird sings. And that was in Paul Laurence Dunbar's poem, Sympathy, in 1899. In 1983, Caged Bird was published in Maya Angelou's poetry collection. And the poem actually describes the opposing experiences between two birds. One bird is able to live in nature as it pleases, while a different caged bird suffers in captivity. When Maya Angelou adopts Dunbar's phrase, she called her young self a caged bird. And what do you think was her cage? What kept her from freedom? Would you believe racism, sexism, insecurity, poverty, abuse? Would you believe brutal slavery, racial segregation, social discrimination? How new is it? 1899, 1974, 1983, 1989, 2003, by the way, which is when I understood what Stevie Wonder meant when he said Iraq, 2021. We just didn't have access to the fire because we were only dealing with our local fires. Hate and love have been around and connected for a long time. Stop, pause, and let me click on what Vic just said. Thank you, Vic. Like I said, you can't make this stuff up, and we didn't practice. All right. That's one of the things that we want to notice. But again, let me go back into what I have prepared, because I want to say how we want to combat that, because we're talking about the Siamese twins. The same things are happening right now. But we didn't know about it before, and now we know about it. So hate and love have been around and connected for a long time. And I hope it didn't seem like I focused more on the hate. But what I focused on was how we sometimes misunderstand the value requirement in love. Let ourselves value everyone. You see, we must acknowledge that the enemy is in the midst so that we can appreciate the victory. Excuse me. That's what I mean. That's how love overcomes hate. Let ourselves value the lessons we get from the negativity. That's why I said we have to understand the value requirement in love so that we can overcome the hate. And we must acknowledge that the enemy is in the midst so that we can appreciate the victory. Why? In 2 Chronicles 20 and 15 in the NIV version, it says, "For the battle is not yours, but God's. Take up your positions, Stand firm and see the deliverance the Lord will give you, O Judah and Jerusalem. Do not be afraid. Do not be discouraged. Go out and face them tomorrow, and the Lord will be with you. With the E connecting our Siamese twins, hate is attached to feelings that we can't control, hurt and expectation. And what we can't control about them is we can't control them arising because they're part of the subconscious human experience and they are easily in the moment. We are hurt and we have expectations in the moment when something happens based on the past. But it's part of what is called the negativity bias. The negativity bias is our tendency not only to register negative stimuli more readily, but also to dwell on those events. When something happens, we instantly can go to the negative impact that has on our lives. And that same thing is happening today. I leave you with that. I leave that comment up there. Thank you, Vic, because the negativity bias is still here. And we instantly go to the negative. But where was I? Okay. But when we look at love, so hate is it, let me go back that one screen. Hate is attached to feelings that we can't control, hurt and expectation. And that's part of the negativity bias. Love is attached to what we can control, ourselves and how we feel about other people. Remember, value, the requirement in value. And I believe that your song will be best heard when your lyrics are of love. Let's sing more about love than we sing about hate. Let's acknowledge that hate is there, but let's sing it out with love. And it's not an easy thing to do, but it is what God intended. And Vic, this is one of your favorite. I actually thought about you as I was writing this down. And that is that light has to overcome the darkness, even if it takes all night to do so. We will do the same through love. Keep your head up and keep your spirit in the game. Oh, Sabrina's on board. Good to see her. I don't see her click there, so thank you. But we're going to give her a shout out because Vic gave her a shout out. So glad to see you, Sabrina. I didn't see you in the thread, so I didn't know you were there. Thank you, Vic. Keep an attendance for us, okay, as we get ready to close out. But so let me say this to you. I posted a meme on July 12th, and it said, the more you think, the more you'll think of. And then the narrative with it said, imagine that your thoughts have been focused on the positive things and blessings weaving through your life. How much more blessed will you feel? And how much more passionately will you be able to say, God is good? That's when we think and we focus on the beauty of God and what he has. And in fact, with our Siamese twins, hate and love, the only thing that they have in common is the E. And because of that E in glue, God's love undoes everything. On Wednesdays, we don't have to hump to keep it together. What we have to do is keep it together by recognizing that God's love undoes everything. And you are part of that. Look, I want to thank you for enjoying the message today, participating with me. But I want to remind people, the pandemic is not over. Okay? There are people I know stores say if you've gotten vaccinated, you don't need to wear your mask. Don't hate on people that don't have their mask. You know what? There are actually people who have never worn a mask. And so they're hiding behind, I've been vaccinated. But you know what? There are people who actually cannot be vaccinated. My younger sister is right now allergic to the vaccine. So don't just decide that everybody is divergent because they didn't get vaccinated. But what I also say, it's not over. So therefore, you have to recognize that what can you do? Even though I've been vaccinated, I still wear my mask. Okay. So, and so if you can wear your mask, we don't have the same discomfort. You know who I understand? The people in the store who work in the stores, the retail stores, the supermarkets, whatever, who have to keep their mask on all day. That's somewhat difficult and annoying. But us, we can come in the store, put our mask on, go back to our car and take it off and breathe fresh air. So that's what I'm saying, y'all. Put it in perspective, okay? The pandemic is not over. We're still going through it. There are cases of people catching COVID even though they've been vaccinated. Why? Because we found out that they were, the vaccination didn't work for them. It's just the same as we all have a different blood type. It doesn't work for everybody. That's why it's called practicing medicine, because the doctors are doing the best they can, keeping the data and saying, okay, we got this solved. Here's what we missed. Let's find a way to make up for that part for those people. That's what's going on. So that's why I click on you, Vic. I wear my mask and I'm vaccinated because I know I certainly do. And that's what I want to remind you to always do that. So I'll see you next next Wednesday on Glue Wednesday, where we remember that God's love undoes everything. Not that it tears anything apart, but whatever is torn apart, God's love will pull it back together. Thank you for participating. And even if you're watching the video, you can still put comments in the thread. I'd love to hear from you and connect with you. And then always, sometimes I look at the messages and that helps me think of what message I want to come up with for the next broadcast. See, so we're always working together. I'm Sporty King. This has been Glue Wednesday, and this has been my absolute joy. Goodness to you, not knowing whether it's morning, afternoon, or evening, but it's good.